Hey everybody, I'm really glad you found Suncrest Messages. I do hope you'll take a minute to subscribe to either our podcast or our YouTube channel. And you can also download the Suncrest app. There's great stuff there that goes far beyond these messages. Either way, I hope that the next 30 minutes helps you integrate faith with your life. Enjoy.
So you see, this is the thing about Thursday night service. You get the real deal, because you can hear Chris Corelli laughing somewhere back there, and I think, I only had about 10 seconds to come up with a comeback, but by Sunday morning, I'll have a great comeback for what he just said in just a little bit. So I'm really glad that you're here today. We are going to talk about life on the other side of awkward. It is actually true that I have about 45 years of experience of awkwardness, as I imagine that you do also. And one of the big questions, of course, is what do you do when it gets awkward? That's what this whole series is about. And I thought, what better way to start the series than to create some awkwardness in the room right off the bat? Aren't you excited about that? So this won't be awkward for some of you because you're extroverts. It will be awkward for some of you because you're introverts. But I actually am going to do a little experiment in the room right now. Don't move yet, but in just a moment I'm going to have you stand up. I'm going to have you introduce yourself to someone. They don't have to be a complete stranger, but don't do it like if you're sitting next to your spouse or your kids. Don't choose them. It has to be someone you don't really know well. So you're just going to introduce yourself, and then I want you to mention 3 things to this other person, okay? You're going to say what your name is. Give me just first name. No problem. You're going to say how long you've been coming to Suncrest. So tonight could be your first night. That's awesome. That's going to be really awkward, isn't it? Or maybe you've been coming a long time. So your name, first name, how long you've been coming to Suncrest, and then I want you to tell them where you went to elementary school. Where you went to elementary school, okay? So right now, everybody stand up. Can we, I didn't tell them to do this. Can we have some lights in the room? That would be helpful to us. I want you to find somebody. If it needs to be a group of 3, that's okay. But don't leave anybody alone. Don't leave anybody standing alone. Your name, how long you've been at Suncrest, and where you went to elementary school. All right, that seems like enough time at least for one person. Make sure you're moving on to the next person. Your name, how long you've been at Suncrest, and where you went to elementary school. And then you can go back to your seats. So go back to your seats, okay? Like right now, everybody go back to your seats. That's awesome. That's awesome. So maybe you met a new friend tonight. Maybe you learned something about somebody else. Really, my point of that is I do want it to feel a little unusual, and I want you to think about your elementary school. I want you to think about your elementary school, because here I think is a pretty common progression for all of us with our elementary schools. When you were in kindergarten and maybe first grade, and the teacher asked a question, like almost the whole room, they put their hands up, right? And it's like a competition to see who can be the one to answer the question. And then usually by 3rd grade or so, some people have dropped out of the putting their hands up thing, and a lot less have their hands up. And by the time you get to 5th or 6th grade, if your elementary school went to 6th grade, then you're at a place where you're like, only a few people are still raising their hands when the teacher asks a question. So this is what I need to know in the room. This is what I need to know in the room. So you're thinking back to your elementary school. When you were in kindergarten, were you one of the people to raise your hand? Show me your hand if you were in kindergarten. In kindergarten, like most of us did that, right? All right, a lot of us. Okay. When you were in 3rd grade, like did you keep doing that through 3rd grade? A lot of you are still doing it in 3rd grade. That's really good. Now, like when you're in 5th and 6th grade, how many of you are still like, I'll answer the teacher's question in 5th and 6th grade? Like you're actually the people we hated, okay? I mean, it's like, come on, can we just move through class? Come on. So, but if you think about this, think about it. Like, what's the reason that at one stage you raised your hand, and then kind of as life went on, you stopped raising your hand? As elementary school went on, you stopped raising your hand. And I can think of a few reasons, right? Reason number 1, it's because I stopped knowing the answers, right? I'm not going to raise my hand and on purpose give a wrong answer or just guess at something and be embarrassed, right? That's one potential reason you stop raising your hand. Potential reason number 2, you stop raising your hand because you're not 100% sure you know the answer. Like you think you know it, But you've just decided, I'm going to stop taking the risk. The last thing I want to happen is maybe get it wrong, even though I think I probably know the answer. Another reason people stop raising their hand is because they've noticed all the cool people stopped raising their hand. And they think, I don't want to be one of the uncool people. I want to be one of the cool people. And it doesn't look like the cool people are raising their hands, so it kind of goes that direction. And it's not just when a teacher asks a question, right? It's actually when the teacher asks for a volunteer. Early on, lots of people raise their hand. Somehow as you get older, fewer people raise their hand. And it's not just when the teacher asks for a volunteer. Sometimes the teacher is interested if any of the students have questions. And this is what's wild. Almost all the students have questions, but very few of them actually raise their hand to ask the question. Because when you raise your hand, you're kind of putting yourself out there, right? And the potential for it to be awkward is very high. And we as human beings have this propensity, an instinct, I think, that if we start to find ourselves in an awkward situation, our natural inclination is to back away from it, to try to avoid it, to try to avoid the awkwardness. Now, here's the thing. If you stopped raising your hand in 4th grade with your teacher, I don't care. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But if the progression of I stopped putting myself out there, I stopped raising my hand, I started thinking about what other people would think instead of volunteering, I stopped asking questions for whatever fear there is, and that actually kind of became an adaptation of your life, not just of your 4th grade elementary class, then you know exactly what I'm talking about today. You know that whenever it comes to taking a risk, that whenever there's a tension to a conversation, whenever there's the possibility something could go wrong, even if something also could go beautifully right, you've kind of signed up in life in big life-defining ways and very small everyday ways to say, you know what, I'm just going to stay back. I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not figuratively going to raise my hand. And I think that's tragic. Because the storyline, in just everyday sort of ways, for many, many people, I talk to people all the time, for many, many people, possibly you, is that what could have been a rich conversation with someone just stayed dull. Because when it had the potential to be a little awkward, you stepped back. And what could have been a place in your life where you made a difference in someone else's life became a place where you made no difference at all. Because there was an element of awkwardness to that, and you stepped back. That it's possible in many people's lives that you actually have a sense of something you think God wants you to do. But it's scary, and it takes some faith, and it's a risk, and it totally could go wrong. And so since all those things are possibilities, you say, I'm not going to. And then you live a life that is absent of the work of God and the chance for God to work through you because you hesitate. You stall, you step back, and you settle. And while your design on that is you have this recipe in your mind to say, I feel like I need to play it safe, it ends up that you're actually just playing it small. That your life is of very little significance, your relationships tend to be very shallow. The richness of life that comes with moving through the awkwardness to where real life lives doesn't exist because you decided, I'm not going to raise my hand. And many people have talked about this because there's plenty of inspirational quotes about a crowd that goes this way and a smaller crowd that actually makes a difference. Let me share a few with you. I think you'll be inspired by these like I am. I've used these before. Theodore Roosevelt, this is one of my favorite quotes ever. Just follow this with me. He says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. It's living on the other side of what is awkward. How about this one? Some of you know Robert Frost. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere in the ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Or how about this from George Bernard Shaw? I love this quote. You're going to love this. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man, the unreasonable one, persists to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. Or how about this from Henry David Thoreau? Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to their graves with the song still in them. We know that's true. Why is it true? It's true because when most people step up and start to experience something that's awkward, instead of stepping through, they step back. Or maybe, I'm sure you've seen this if you're on social media, maybe this image is the one that's helpful. There is our comfort zones, and there's a place where the magic happens. And what you know is the magic does not happen when you stay in your comfort zone. And so this is a series about life on the other side of awkward. In some ways, this is a series about confidence. One of the reasons people don't step through the awkwardness is their confidence. And one of the reasons people are of low confidence is we play a comparison game. You look at all the other people around you, and these days we look at their social media feed, which is actually just the highlight. Actually, it's a faked highlight reel of their life. But you look at other people, and their life looks so great, and you put yourself, you're like, well, I can't do what they do, and your confidence sinks. And here's the thing about confidence and awkwardness. If you have to be sure that you're going to be successful before you ever step into the awkwardness, you'll never step into it. If you have to have a guaranteed result at the end, if you have to be fully confident it's going to work out, you'll never step through. But this is why the faith part of this is so important. This isn't just about you and your self-confidence. This is about doing what's right and what's good and what's godly, even when you don't feel confident. In some ways, this is a series about self-consciousness. One of the reasons that people don't step into and through awkward situations is because all of us have this propensity to be self-referential. And our decision about whether we're going to go for it, whether we're going to try to make a difference, whether we're going to have a hard conversation, whether I'm going to step into the awkwardness, my whole framework, your whole framework for thinking about that to some degree is, well, how will I look? How will I look if I fail? How will I look if I stand out? What will people think of me? And allowing the idea of what will people think of me to drive our lives is a recipe for a small, inconsequential life. In some ways, this is a series about Northwest Indiana. This is always kind of funny to me because I came from a small town that has a little bit of an inferiority complex itself. All the people in my small town say, oh, Greg moved to the big city, right? And then I moved to Northwest Indiana, which I thought was part of the big city. And listen, you know this. Been here 23 years. I love Northwest Indiana. But there's a certain mindset around our region that I would love to play a role in busting wide open. It is a mindset of practicality with a little bit of, I push myself up by pushing you down mixed in. And so the result is lots of people get pushed down. They're not encouraged to dream dreams. They're not encouraged to be bold. They're encouraged many times to keep their head down. And I think, oh, you potentially miss out on so much of life and what God has for you because of a cultural mindset that we're commonly surrounded by. And so these are my questions for you. What do you do? What do you do when you're in a room and a bully is making fun of somebody? What do you do? Because stepping up and running interference is awkward, and it could totally go wrong. So you just let it go? What do you do when you read an article in the paper or you come across the story of someone's life, and when you read it, it breaks your heart? Because when you read the story of that person's life, you think it's not right. That's not the way the world should be. Do you just cry a little bit, close up the article, and go back to your day? Or do you let it bother you in such a way that you say, you know what, I'm not sure if I can make a difference, but doggone it, I'm going to try. I can't sit here and do nothing. What do you do when your relationships have just become mundane? What do you do when the conflict has set in and you decided basically this marriage has turned into roommates and I guess we'll just always be roommates? What do you do? Do you lean into it? Or do you settle? Say, well, I guess this is the way it's going to be. It would be awkward to do anything else. What do you do when you actually sense that God is leading you to something? And it's not something that would be easy. It's something that's going to take some rearrangement of your life and some trust in Him and putting yourself out there or raising your hand. What do you do when that happens? Do you just step back and say, if I just close my eyes or take a nap or have a drink or watch a movie, maybe that feeling will go away? Or do you want to be the kind of person who says, when God prompts me with something, and I know it's going to be tough, I know it's going to be awkward, I'm going to have to put myself out there, I probably won't seem normal, but it's right. I'm going to do it. Ultimately, the story is this. Is the story of your life a story of settling? Or is it a story of seizing? Seizing the moment, seizing the prompting, seizing the opportunity. And I need you to know this. This is not just an inspirational talk. It's not just an inspirational talk that says, go take the bull by the horns. Carpe diem. Go after it. It's not just a motivational talk. If I understand God about this, and I think I do, this is so much more than that. This is about you and I believing and paying attention to the times and the places where I sense God might be prompting me to put myself out there, where I'd like to grow. I'd like to make a difference. I'd like for Him to use me. And finding those places where you sense God is leading you and deciding that you are not going to take a pass, even though it will be awkward. Jesus seemed to want to give us a vision for the idea that this is rooted in who you are. Here's what he says in John 10:10. He says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Here's what the thief is: the evil one, the deceiver himself. Whatever ugly, insidious spiritual forces are at work in this world, they are at work in your life, and they're at work in my life. They would like to put us into a place where they steal life from us, where they destroy the chance to make a real difference in this world, where they kill our hopes and dreams. That's what the thief does. But Jesus says, I've come that you could have life and have it to the full. It'll change your life. You'll live a totally different way. And when you live a different way, it'll probably change lives of all kinds of people around you. You could do that. That's Jesus saying, this is why I came. In another part of his teaching, this is what he says. He says, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. And this is a very strong conviction that I want you to get. That playing it safe is actually a very dangerous way to live. Deciding that the boundaries of my life are when something starts to feel awkward, that's as far as I'll go. You might think that's a recipe for playing it safe, but it's just the recipe for playing it small. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. I actually want to ask you to repeat that after me. So I'll say it first. You say it back to me, okay? Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Say it with me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. That's the message of Jesus. And so, stepping back from awkward is actually stepping back from all the possibilities that are out there. And today I want to ask you to be the kind of person who would raise your hand. To be the kind of person who, when someone's getting bullied, even though you might get punched in the nose, you'll stand up and say, it's not right. It's not right. The kind of person who won't be content with relationships that are dull or seem destined to lack intimacy. To be the kind of person who will not sense that God is prompting them to do something and then tell God essentially, I'll take a pass. This isn't the first time I've talked about awkwardness. About a year and a half ago, I had a message where, one of the blanks you fill in said, life is on the other side of awkward. And I was amazed after I said that out loud how many conversations I had about it. One was with a person who's become a friend for Jenny and I. Her name's Penny. And I just want you to hear a little bit of her story.
Greg once said, life is on the other side of awkward. When I heard that phrase, I immediately wrote it down. After service, I went home and put it on a sticky note and put it on my mirror. It is still there today. That phrase has become my life motto. Couple examples I can give you, one being praying out loud. Never in a million years would I have ever prayed out loud. And now it is not a big deal. You have to live on the other side of awkward to make things comfortable. Number two, I was presented a leadership role here at Suncrest, and I rose my hand and accepted the challenge. I now lead a team, and it was awkward at first, but now I am very comfortable, and it feels so good to be able to lead others and teach them what I have learned.
most of the time, this is simple, everyday things. And we should acknowledge this possibility that when you put yourself out there, it could all go wrong. In fact, the reason most people don't step through the awkwardness is because of this. You've started to picture how it could go wrong, and if it's going to end up like that, you'd rather not experience that. But the truth is, I think for most of us, when we put ourselves into these awkward situations, these awkward conversations, sure, it could go wrong. I mean, when Penny decided, you know what, I don't feel comfortable praying out loud, but that's something I could, I know it's awkward. What's the worst that could happen? Here's the worst that could happen. She could totally try to pray out loud in front of a group of people, and she could stumble over her words, and she could say the wrong thing, and she could just want to get out of it. People do this. It's like amen, and it's over. And then I think, so what would happen? What's the worst that could happen? Do you think the people around Penny would be like, loser, she doesn't even know how to pray out loud? I mean, if you do that, you're the loser, right? Actually what would happen is people are like, man, she took a risk. She took a step. I respect that, right? I bet she'll do better next time. Or she's doing something I can't see myself doing. I totally respect that she put it. That's, when you think, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is it could go wrong. But then you are the one at least trying valiantly, even if you fail. You at least were in the arena. And of course, the flip side is there's another possibility. You could miss out on being, what this stands for, used by God to change lives. Used by God to change lives. That's our mission as a church. But every time I start to announce that, our church has a mission, our mission is to be used by God to change lives, something kind of stirs in my head, and I think, in some ways that's the backwards way of saying it, that our church has a mission. Because when you listen to Jesus describe his vision for a church, it wasn't so much that the church had a mission, it's that there's a mission from Jesus, and the mission as a church. The mission as a church. This is the storyline of your lives. It's the potential storyline, and this is how the church ought to function. That we would be out there looking for all the broken parts of this world, and we'd decide we're not okay with them, and then we'd put ourselves into those situations, and sometimes they wouldn't work out so well, and sometimes they would, but we're going to trust God no matter what, and you would actually not have the ability to change somebody's life. Many people think that. They think, well, I can't sign up for that. I don't have the ability. That's not the point. The point is the availability. That I would put myself in a place for transformation. And that's what I'm asking you to do. And 90% of the time, that doesn't actually happen in this building. It doesn't happen through Suncrest programs. It doesn't happen because you got asked by a pastor to do something. It's while you're at work and while you're in your neighborhood and while you're in your marriage and while you're teaching your kids that God wants to use you to change people's lives. I do a lot of awkward things. Some of them are intentional and some of them are unintentional, right? But let me just tell you a little story. This will be good especially for the Thursday night crowd. If you were here 2 weeks ago, during the worship service, there were 4 teenage boys who were sitting right here. You remember this, don't you? Yeah, some of the rest of you remember it, right? You 3 girls were sitting in the second row, and they saw it all going down. So here's the thing. These teenage boys, who happens to be sitting over here right now, and I think they're awesome. I do. Actually, here's what I think they're really awesome about, is that they bring energy to worship in some ways that could lead the rest of us, honestly. On that particular night, they were bringing some distraction to worship, right? And they know that. So what did I do during the worship service? Some of you saw this. I walked right over here. I put my hand around one of their shoulders. I'm like, this isn't cool. I'm not trying to scold you, but listen, we're worshiping. Don't be distracting. And was it awkward? It was totally awkward. It was awkward for me. It was awkward for them. It was awkward for all of you who were here and watched me do it. So I made a point right after that, because I got to talk to them for about 20 seconds and went back to my spot. Right after the message, I said, I'm going to make sure I connect with those guys, right? Got to have actually a really great conversation with those 4 guys. And then if you were here last week, you know what happened? I baptized 2 of them. This is how it works, my friends. There's a lot of reasons to hesitate, and only a few reasons to go for it. But the reasons to go for it are good. They're the ones to follow if God is prompting you, if you're doing what's right, if you're fixing the brokenness. It's time to step through the awkwardness and stop being so self-referential. Stop living your life according to what you think people are going to think of you. Instead of doing what's right and godly and difference-making, raise your hand. Take the step. Don't live that safe life. This is how it says in Romans 12. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Most of the time this passage is taught, I think it's taught wrong. I'm sure I've taught it wrong before. People think, oh, the pattern of this world, that must be all those sinful things people are doing. You know, a lot of people watch porn. You shouldn't watch porn. That's like the pattern of this world. I can promise you that's not what this passage is about. This passage is about just conforming to the way everyone else is living. It's going with the flow instead of going against the flow. Going against the flow is awkward. It is. But the call of God, the will of God, to be able to test and approve what God's will is, here's what he says: I can guarantee you it is not my plan for your life to go with the flow. I can guarantee you that it is not my plan for your life to be a person whose reference point is, what will people think of me? What if I fail? What will they say about me? If that's the reference point for your life, that is the description of conforming to the pattern of this world. And instead, there's a different way that is God's plan for you. Now, I'm going to describe this last part very quickly here, but I want you to see it, and I think it has some practical examples that you'll be able to implement into your life. When Jesus did his central teaching, we call it the Sermon on the Mount, he got to the end of that teaching, and this is what he said at the end of the teaching. He said, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. He's like, let's be clear about this. There's lots of people who say I'm Lord, like they tell their friends that, but I'm not. But only the one who does the will of my Father, only the one who follows the promptings of God, only the one who goes against the flow. Like those are the people who I'm really their Lord. They're not just spouting it off. And we don't have to guess about what Jesus is talking about here, because we can just rewind through different places in the Sermon on the Mount and say, oh, that's what he was talking about, and I wonder if this is what he's talking about to you. One of these examples, I'm sure, is yours tonight. Here's what he said. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father who's in heaven. He says this is a very dark world. It is not difficult to find the dark places of this world, and your job, follower of Jesus, is to let your light shine when you see darkness. And I know when you see darkness, you might think, I couldn't do anything about that. How could I possibly make a difference? Oh, I'd trip over my words. All those are awkward. And Jesus is saying, call me Lord. This is what you do. When it's dark, you be the light. Don't tweet about it. Don't post on Facebook. Like, that's not changing the world. Go be the light in somebody's life who has darkness. How about this? All you need to say is simply yes or no. This is the passage that says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And how many of you have been in a spot where you want to say yes? You think you should say yes, but instead you say no. I hope that you're prompted 15 times this week and you feel back to this message and you're like, I think I'm supposed to say yes, but I'm kind of prone to say no. Say yes. Say yes. Step into the awkwardness. Let him be Lord. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. The person who makes you mad, the person who's done you wrong, all those people. This week, love them. It's awkward. But if you love those who love you, La-ti frickin' da. That's what Jesus says. I mean, it's not exactly what Jesus says, but it's my version of what Jesus says. But this is the point. He's like, even the tax collectors do that. Everybody does that. You're just going with the flow when you love people who love you. And everybody thinks they're special. I love them. They already love you. Big deal. Love somebody who doesn't love you this week. When you see them at the office and they're the person who makes you mad, love them. It'll be awkward and it'll be right. And who knows what could come from it. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't life more than that? Don't be self-referential. Don't be the person who thinks, I can't go if I don't have something to wear. What would people think of me? Don't think about life like that. Life's more than that. Don't think about yourself all the time. That'll hold you back. You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye. Then you'll be able to see clearly to correct your brother. I don't know about you, but one of the most awkward things to do is to admit that you're wrong. And many people don't do it because it's awkward. You should do it. You should say, you know what, I'm the one who's wrong. You know what, instead of judging someone else, I got problems in my own life. I'm going to own my own stuff rather than telling everyone else what they have wrong. Life on the other side of awkward. It's where it is. I think it's where God is. Let me pray for us right now. God, I want you to prompt every person in this room this week. I'm asking you, God, I'm praying to you, asking you to prompt us multiple times and to help us see the moments in our life where we step back only because it's awkward. And that you would prompt us in such a way that we step forward. We do what's right, we lean in, we have the tough conversation. We step into the mess with somebody. We know you're with us, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.